Hello, weary wanderer of the night. If you're here, you might be struggling to fall asleep, or maybe you just crave a calm tale of politics, bad hygiene, and ancient monarchs. Tonight, we'll begin a journey back in time, a journey so slow paced, so oddly specific, so deeply unimportant to your daily life that you may just drift off. But don't let the boring fool you. Behind the snooze-worthy surface lies a scandal, and it all begins with something very human. One king's horrible breath and black teeth actually changed who ruled England. Let's set the scene. The year is 1592. The Queen of England, Elizabeth of, is 59 years old, unmarried, and childless. She is one of the most powerful women in the world. But there's a problem. Not a war, not a rebellion, not even a religious uprising. The problem is her teeth. By the 1590s, Queen Elizabeth's appearance had become iconic. The tall forehead, the powdered white skin, the bejeweled gowns. She was a living symbol of English power. But behind the mask of her royal image was a dental disaster. By all contemporary accounts, Elizabeth's teeth were rotting. Not just a little. We're talking blackened molars, inflamed gums, and chronic halitosis, bad breath that could knock out a horse. The Venetian ambassador Giovanni Scaramelli wrote of her black and ugly teeth and how she spoke with difficulty. Courtiers whispered about her foul breath. Physicians were too afraid to treat her. Now you might be thinking, so what? People had bad teeth back then. And you'd be right. Dental hygiene in the 16th century was about as advanced as curing a cold by bleeding yourself with leeches. But here's the twist. Elizabeth's decaying teeth became a political crisis. How? Because she couldn't eat, because she couldn't speak clearly, and because no one could talk to her for long without gagging. This meant that vital state meetings were shortened or canceled. Diplomats had to guess her intentions. Ambassadors couldn't read her reactions. Her court became unstable. And behind the scenes, a brutal question began to surface. If the queen can't govern properly, who will rule next? Elizabeth I was famously the Virgin Queen. She never married. She never had children, which meant that when she died, there would be no clear heir. That's a problem in any monarchy, but it was a catastrophe in Tudor England. Her father, Henry the Eighth, had left a trail of broken marriages and religious schisms. Her siblings, Edward VI and Mary the Fir, had both ruled briefly, each reign marked by crisis. So, the pressure on Elizabeth to secure the future of the monarchy was immense, and yet she refused to name a successor. Why? Because naming an heir was a dangerous game. It could invite plots, revolts, or pressure to abdicate. But the more her health declined, especially her ability to communicate, the more desperate her court became for a plan. And the queen? She stayed silent and smelled terrible. Let's pause here. Why were Elizabeth's teeth so bad? The answer lies in a surprising luxury: sugar. In the 16th century, sugar was a status symbol. It was rare, expensive, and imported from distant lands. Royals and nobles used it in everything: tea, wine, fruits, and even medicine. The more you had, the wealthier you appeared. Elizabeth loved sweet things. She reportedly consumed candied violets, spiced wines, and marzipan regularly, and like many nobles, she cleaned her teeth with honey-soaked cloths and powders made from crushed coral or brick dust. Not ideal, and so, over time, her teeth turned black. Instead of fixing them, she leaned into it. In fact, black teeth became fashionable in Elizabethan England, seen as a sign of wealth. But even fashion has its limits, and when your queen can't chew, talk, or smile without pain, people start wondering if the crown needs a new head. So now we arrive at the political tension building beneath her breath. As Elizabeth aged and her condition worsened, nobles and foreign powers began preparing for the inevitable. There were many contenders for the throne. James VI of Scotland, the ideal most likely heir, but a foreign king. Arabella Stuart, English-born, but young and untested. The Spanish Infanta, Isabella, a Catholic favorite in Europe, and a dozen distant Tudors and Plantagenets, all with thin claims. Each had supporters, each had enemies, and none of them could act, because Elizabeth refused to name any of them as her heir. This wasn't just pride, it was a strategy. So long as she named no successor, no faction could gain power over another. She ruled from the center, but as her health declined, that center began to crumble, and soon whispers began to swirl. Was Elizabeth mentally fit to rule? Could the empire survive a silent, sickly queen? Sometimes empires aren't shaped by armies or treaties. Sometimes they're shaped by molars, by candy, by vanity, and by one queen's refusal to admit that maybe, just maybe, she needed a dentist. How did Elizabeth's failing health and terrible teeth affect the politics of England? It turns out, more than anyone expected, Elizabeth's rotting teeth weren't just a personal problem. They became a crisis at the heart of government, at a time when a ruler's ability to communicate was vital. Her painful mouth made her quieter and more withdrawn. This wasn't just about bad breath or discomfort. It affected diplomacy, decision-making, and the very stability of the kingdom. Elizabeth's court was a place where words mattered as much as swords. Every phrase she uttered could shift alliances, start wars, or calm rebellions. But with each passing year, the queen spoke less clearly. Sometimes, courtiers noticed she seemed to struggle to form words. Her breath was so foul that those around her often tried to keep conversations short. This silence created confusion. Foreign ambassadors who came to England to negotiate treaties or alliances found her responses vague or incomplete. Instead of the sharp, confident speeches Elizabeth was known for, they encountered pauses, grunts, or evasive answers. Her advisors, too, grew uncertain. How could they implement policies if the monarch's will was unclear? Meanwhile, Elizabeth's dental problems worsened. It was not just the pain, but the impact on her ability to eat. Rotten teeth meant she could only chew soft foods, reducing her strength. She appeared pale and tired. These physical signs fed rumors at court that the queen was declining not only in health, but in mind. Her refusal to name an heir added fuel to the fire. Without an official successor, nobles began plotting behind closed doors. The most obvious candidate was James VI of Scotland, her closest relative and son of Mary, Queen of Scots. But many English lords disliked the idea of a Scottish king ruling England. Others preferred candidates with more English blood, but weaker claims. The uncertainty made the court a powder keg of tension. Across Europe, Elizabeth's silence was seen as weakness. Spain's King Philip II, a fierce Catholic and longtime enemy of Protestant England, waited for a chance to reclaim the throne for Catholicism. France and the Papal States also watched carefully, hoping to sway the succession in their favor. The Queen's inability to speak plainly was like a crack in England's fortress walls. Behind the scenes, Elizabeth's court doctors were powerless. They feared to treat her teeth directly, knowing the Queen's temper and the risk of infection. Instead, she tried homemade remedies, powders of crushed coral, honey-soaked cloths, and herbal washes. None worked. Her teeth blackened further, her gums bled, and her breath worsened. Her dental misery became a kind of dark secret. Courtiers whispered about it but dared not speak openly. To acknowledge the Queen's decay was to acknowledge a threat to the entire monarchy, and so the rot remained hidden behind powdered masks and royal protocol. This slow decline had surprising effects. Without clear guidance from Elizabeth, decisions stalled, wars were delayed, treaties dragged on, court factions grew bolder, each trying to position themselves for the inevitable change. The Queen's black teeth, in a way, had loosened her grip on power. One story from the time illustrates this well. An ambassador visiting Elizabeth reported that during a state meeting, the Queen suddenly stopped speaking mid-sentence. Her mouth hurt too much, and she excused herself. The room fell, silent. For a moment, the entire government seemed to pause, held hostage by one woman's toothache. It's strange to think how something so mundane, a bad tooth, could shake the foundations of a nation. But in Elizabeth's England, where royal presence was everything, it mattered deeply. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's personal hygiene habits reflected her times but worsened her problem. Sugar, the luxury import, was a major culprit. The Queen loved sweets, candied flowers, spiced wines, and marzipan. Sugar consumption was a status symbol, but it fed bacteria that destroyed teeth. Unlike today, there was no toothpaste or dentist visits. Cleaning teeth with coral dust or brick powder only scraped enamel away. Despite this, black teeth became fashionable among the nobility. It was a sign of wealth to have decayed teeth, as only the rich could afford so much sugar. Elizabeth's appearance, therefore, was both a political symbol and a health crisis. As her physical decline progressed, so did the political intrigue. Nobles plotted, diplomats schemed, and foreign powers waited. The Queen's silence spoke volumes, too many volumes for England's fragile peace, yet Elizabeth held on to power stubbornly. She refused to admit vulnerability, even as her rotting teeth threatened her reign. This refusal prolonged uncertainty and laid the groundwork for the complicated succession crisis that would follow. In the end, Elizabeth's terrible teeth were more than a private tragedy. They shaped decisions, delayed policies, and made the kingdom fragile at a critical moment in history. Sometimes, the fate of empires depends not on armies or laws, but on something as simple as a queen's blackened molars. How did England's leaders cope with the growing uncertainty caused by Elizabeth's failing health and her refusal to name an heir? As the queen's rotting teeth and fading voice cast shadows over the court, the nobles and politicians began to act quietly but urgently behind the scenes. Their whispers and secret meetings would shape the future of the British monarchy. By the late 1590s, Elizabeth's health was visibly declining. The once vibrant monarch was thinner, paler, and spoke less often. Her dental problems worsened, blackened, teeth made eating painful, and her breath was notorious at court. Yet, outwardly, she maintained the facade of strength. Royal portraits from this time show her adorned in elaborate gowns and jewels, carefully hiding the decay beneath layers of makeup and lace. But the cracks showed to those paying close attention. Her long speeches were replaced by brief remarks. Political decisions were delayed or left to her closest advisors. Many began to wonder, how much longer could Elizabeth rule? At the center of this quiet storm was the question of succession. Since Elizabeth had no children and refused to name an heir, the throne's future was uncertain. This vacuum of power invited intrigue. Among the contenders, James VI of Scotland was the strongest claimant. As the great-grandson of Henry VII, he had a legitimate claim. But many English nobles feared that uniting England and Scotland under one king could diminish England's independence. James's mother, Mary, Queen of Scots, had been executed by Elizabeth in 1587, adding a complicated layer of tension. Other nobles looked to Arabella Stuart, a young woman with a close bloodline to the Tudors. She was English and Protestant, which made her appealing to those who wanted to keep the monarchy firmly English. However, she lacked the political experience and support necessary to secure the crown. Across the Channel, Spain's King Philip II sought to restore Catholicism in England. His favored candidate was the Spanish Infanta Isabella, a princess with a distant claim through marriage alliances. This was deeply unpopular among England's Protestant majority, but still represented a serious threat to Elizabeth's reign. Amid these competing factions, England's court was a hive of plots and counterplots. Nobles gathered in secret, negotiating, bribing, and scheming to position themselves or their candidates favorably. Alliances shifted quickly, and loyalties were fragile. Elizabeth's refusal to clarify the succession kept these factions in tension, but also prevented any one group from seizing power prematurely. This delicate balance helped maintain peace, at least on the surface. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's personal struggle with her decaying teeth continued. The Queen was famously proud and secretive, and she fiercely resisted any attempts to examine or treat her oral health. Physicians could only offer crude remedies, rinses of vinegar or herbal concoctions, powders made from crushed coral or brick dust, and the occasional extraction when absolutely necessary. None of these treatments helped. The sugar-heavy diet, combined with poor dental hygiene typical of the era, meant her teeth continued to rot. The pain likely affected her sleep, her appetite, and her mood. Yet Elizabeth endured, masking her discomfort with stoic grace. Her black teeth and foul breath became an ironic symbol of her reign, a mixture of beauty and decay, strength and fragility. The queen's silence about her health and her succession plans created a political void that was difficult to fill. Decisions that once would have been quick became slow and uncertain. Foreign diplomats pressed for answers. English nobles pressed for clarity. This uncertainty also fed rumors and anxiety among the general population. People whispered about the Queen's condition, her possible death, and what chaos might follow. England was a country on edge, held together by the fragile presence of a monarch whose own body was failing her. In this context, small events took on outsized importance. A cough, a fainting spell, or a missed appearance could trigger panic or speculation. Every move Elizabeth made was scrutinized for signs of decline. Despite this, the Queen's advisors worked hard to keep the government functioning. They managed day-to-day affairs, negotiated treaties, and tried to maintain order. Yet without clear direction from the throne, their efforts were limited. The political landscape of England during these years was like a chessboard with many players, each waiting for the Queen's next move, any sign that would tip the balance of power. Elizabeth's dental decay, a seemingly minor personal issue, had ripple effects that spread far beyond her mouth. It shaped diplomacy, influenced court politics, and cast a long shadow over the future of the British monarchy. In this delicate dance of power, every tooth mattered. Elizabeth's deteriorating health and blackened teeth weren't just private troubles. They became a symbol of deeper instability at the heart of the English monarchy. As her reign entered its twilight years, the question of who would succeed her grew more urgent and complicated. The uncertainty rippled through every layer of English society, from the highest nobles to the common people. Behind the scenes, the Queen's closest advisors began to prepare for the inevitable transition. They were caught in a difficult position. On one hand, they owed loyalty to Elizabeth, who had ruled for nearly half a century and had guided England through religious upheaval, wars, and political crises. On the other hand, they knew that without a clear heir, the country risked chaos after her death. The Privy Council, Elizabeth's inner circle of trusted ministers, started to discuss succession quietly but carefully. They could not openly challenge the Queen's refusal to name an heir. It was considered treasonous to question the monarch's authority. Yet the pressure was growing. James VI of Scotland remained the leading candidate, with a legitimate blood claim and strong support from some English nobles. His supporters argued that uniting England and Scotland under one ruler could bring peace and stability to both kingdoms. However, others worried about the political and religious implications of a Scottish king on the English throne. Arabella Stuart, a young noblewoman with Tudor blood, was seen by some as a more suitable English candidate, but she was young and inexperienced and lacked the powerful backing necessary to secure the throne. Meanwhile, Spain's King Philip II was determined to restore Catholicism in England. His preferred candidate was the Spanish Infanta Isabella, whose claim was based on dynastic marriages and religious ties. This option alarmed Protestant England and added tension to an already fragile situation. As the Queen's health visibly declined, rumors and fears spread among the public. People speculated about the possibility of civil war, religious conflict, or foreign invasion after Elizabeth's death. The nation was anxious, waiting for a sign of what was to come. Elizabeth's physical decline also affected her ability to govern day to day. Her painful teeth made speaking difficult, and her breath was reportedly so bad that courtiers tried to limit their time in her presence. The Queen often avoided long meetings or public appearances. Despite her personal suffering, Elizabeth remained determined to maintain control. She was a master of political theater, using elaborate ceremonies, portraits, and public appearances to project strength and authority. Yet behind the scenes, the Queen's power was waning. Her dental decay had become a metaphor for the state of her reign, outwardly regal and impressive, but slowly falling apart underneath. Elizabeth's refusal to confront her health problems and name a successor prolonged the uncertainty and instability. This cautious silence bought her time, but also sowed the seeds of future conflict. In the end, the fate of England would be shaped not just by armies or laws, but by the fragile health of one woman and the slow decay hidden behind her powdered mask. The political tension in England was growing thicker with each passing year, a tension that was deeply intertwined with the personal struggles of Queen Elizabeth I, and surprisingly, her decaying teeth. At first glance, it might seem almost absurd. How could something as mundane as rotten teeth influence the fate of a nation? But as we have seen, the Queen's deteriorating health was a mirror to the instability that rippled through England's royal court, its government, and even its relationships with other powerful European countries. To understand just how much Elizabeth's dental decay shaped the politics of her era, we need to look closely at the shifting alliances, the secret meetings, the whispered rumors, and the fragile balance of power during these final years of the Tudor dynasty. The struggle for succession intensifies. Elizabeth's refusal to name an heir was a political choice as much as a personal one. Naming a successor might have provided clarity and prevented chaos, but it also risked undermining her own authority. If she named James VI of Scotland as her heir, she acknowledged that her reign was coming to an end. If she chose someone less obvious, it could provoke backlash and possibly war. This delicate situation left the court in a state of anxious suspense. Many nobles began forming factions, quietly rallying support for their preferred candidate. Some courtiers aligned themselves with James VI or seeing the benefits of a unified Britain. Others, suspicious of Scottish influence, sought to promote English candidates, including Arabella Stuart, despite her youth and relative inexperience. The foreign powers, especially Spain and France, watched this internal tension closely. Spain, under King Philip II, was particularly eager to see a Catholic monarch restored in England. The Spanish Infanta Isabella, while distant in her claim, represented a potential ally for Spanish ambitions in the British Isles. France, meanwhile, had its own interests and occasionally acted as a mediator or agitator, depending on the shifting alliances. Elizabeth's dental problems and declining health added an unusual layer to this already complicated political drama. Her blackened teeth were a physical sign of her frailty, and they made her less able to perform the rituals of monarchy that kept nobles and foreign envoys in line. Her voice grew weaker, her speeches shorter and less frequent. The queen who once commanded the stage with fiery rhetoric was now often silent or muffled, turning audiences and diplomats restless. Diplomacy in the shadow of decay, England's foreign relations suffered under this shadow of uncertainty. Ambassadors and envoys, who once relied on clear communication with Elizabeth, found themselves frustrated. The Queen's dental pain made long conversations difficult, and her breath was notoriously unpleasant, a fact noted in several diplomatic reports from the period. One Spanish envoy wrote in a private letter that Elizabeth's mouth reeked of decay and disease, and that her responses were short and guarded. The ambassador suggested that this physical ailment was a metaphor for the weakened state of English politics. His report was shared among the Spanish court and influenced how they approached negotiations with England. France's diplomats were similarly cautious. They hoped to maintain peace with England, but were aware that the Queen's declining health could shift the balance of power. In secret correspondence, French officials debated whether to support James VI's claim or back a rival candidate who might be more favorable to their interests. This diplomatic uncertainty slowed the pace of treaties and alliances. England's position in Europe became less firm, creating opportunities for Spain and France to maneuver. The Queen's rotting teeth, in a strange way, were influencing the diplomatic chess game on the continent. Court life and the weight of secrecy at the English court. The effects of Elizabeth's condition were just as profound. Court life was a carefully choreographed performance where the Queen's presence, appearance, and speech were crucial to maintaining order. The Queen's decaying teeth made this performance harder to maintain. The Queen often covered her mouth with her hand or held her head in a way that concealed her teeth. Courtiers whispered about her breath and the foul odor that seemed to fill the room when she spoke. It became common for attendants to use scented handkerchiefs or burn incense in the chambers to mask the smell. Despite these discomforts, Elizabeth remained fiercely proud. She refused to allow any physician to perform a thorough dental examination, fearing that it would expose her vulnerability. Instead, she relied on homemade remedies, rinses made from vinegar and herbs, powders crafted from coral or brick dust, and frequent attempts to extract the most painful teeth. These treatments provided little relief. The Queen's oral health continued to decline, and so did her strength and spirits. It is said that she sometimes avoided court functions entirely because of the pain and embarrassment caused by her teeth. The personal cost of power beyond politics and diplomacy. Elizabeth's dental decay took a deep personal toll. She was reportedly in constant pain, which affected her sleep and appetite. The Queen's diet, rich in sugar and sweets, an indulgence common among the Tudor nobility, only worsened her condition. Sugar was a luxury, but it fed the bacteria that destroyed teeth. The Queen's discomfort made her irritable and sometimes withdrawn. She grew distrustful of those around her, suspecting plots and betrayals. Her famous fiery temper became even more pronounced, and she could be ruthless to those she saw as threats. Elizabeth's physical decline mirrored the growing political fragility of her kingdom. The once vibrant and commanding queen was now a shadow of her former self, held together by sheer will and determination. Yet her presence still commanded respect and fear. The impact on governance, Elizabeth's rotting teeth, affected more than her speeches and court appearances. They had a direct impact on governance, as the Queen became less able to communicate effectively. Her advisors found themselves making more decisions without her explicit direction. This shift altered the power dynamics at court. Some ministers grew more confident, while others struggled with the uncertainty. The Queen's silence was both a source of frustration and a catalyst for ambition. Without clear instructions, factions within the court often worked at cross purposes. Policies that once would have been unified became inconsistent. This inconsistency made it harder for England to respond to external threats or internal dissent. The Queen's dental problems, therefore, were not just a matter of health. They were a political factor that shaped the decisions of a nation. The broader cultural context, Elizabeth's dental decay, also reflected the broader medical and cultural context of her time. Dentistry in the 16th century was primitive. There were no modern dentists, no anesthesia, no effective treatments for tooth decay or infection. The wealthy had access to barbers or physicians who could extract teeth, but such procedures were painful and risky. Remedies ranged from herbal concoctions to superstitious rituals. Oral hygiene was limited to rinsing with water or vinegar, and occasionally rubbing teeth with abrasive powders. Sugar consumption was increasing during Elizabeth's reign. As trade expanded and sugar became a luxury commodity, the sweet treats favored by the Queen and nobility contributed directly to tooth decay. Blackened teeth were even considered fashionable in some circles, a bizarre contrast to today's ideals of dental health. Elizabeth's case was extreme, but it was not unique among her peers. Many nobles suffered from dental problems, and these issues affected their appearance, speech, and health. The slow decline toward an uncertain future as Elizabeth entered her 60s and 70s. The slow decay of her teeth became a symbol of the slow decay of her reign. Her refusal to face the issue head on prolonged political uncertainty and increased anxiety across England. Despite her pride and strength, Elizabeth was human. Her physical suffering was real, and it shaped her decisions. The pain and embarrassment caused by her rotten teeth contributed to her silence and secrecy, which in turn fueled the political instability of her final years. The fate of England rested on a fragile thread, the health of a queen whose blackened teeth hid a kingdom's uncertain future. Elizabeth's failing health and worsening dental decay were not only private burdens, they became public matters of state, shaping the politics of England and the wider British Isles in profound ways. By this point in her reign, the Queen's blackened teeth and painful mouth had transformed from a personal affliction into a symbol of the fragility of Tudor power. As Elizabeth entered her later years, the cracks in her monarchy deepened. Without a named successor, political factions vied for influence, each seeking to position themselves or their preferred candidate for the eventual transfer of power. The Queen's silence on the matter created an atmosphere of cautious plotting and delicate alliances. making the royal court a powder keg of ambition and anxiety. The court's unspoken crisis within the royal court, Elizabeth's deteriorating condition, was a source of both concern and fear. No one dared speak openly about her health, especially her teeth, but everyone noticed the changes. Elizabeth, once renowned for her eloquence and commanding presence, became more withdrawn. Her speeches were shorter and less frequent, often delivered behind tightly held fans or with her hand discreetly covering her mouth. The foul breath caused by her rotting teeth made courtiers nervous, and some tried to limit their time near her. This physical decline had direct political consequences. The Queen's advisers found it harder to interpret her wishes or gauge her moods. In an age when monarchs ruled by personal authority and direct commands, this was a significant problem. Without clear directives, the Privy Council and other ministers were forced to fill the gaps, sometimes acting in conflicting ways. This weakened the government's ability to respond decisively to both domestic issues and international challenges. The succession question, a shadow over the realm. The succession issue was the most pressing problem of Elizabeth's reign. With no children of her own and no official heir, the question of who would succeed her remained a dangerous secret. James VI of Scotland was the leading candidate. His claim was strong. He was the son of Mary, Queen of Scots, Elizabeth's cousin, and had Tudor blood through his great-grandmother, Margaret Tudor, sister of Henry VIII. James was Protestant, which made him more acceptable to English nobles wary of a Catholic monarch. Still, many in England were wary of a Scottish king. National identity and rivalry played a role in the debate. Some feared that James's accession would reduce England's independence or lead to an influx of Scottish influence in English politics. Arabella Stuart was another candidate, younger and English by birth, with a claim through her grandmother, Margaret Douglas. Although she was favored by some nobles for her Englishness, she lacked political support and experience. Foreign powers also had their preferences. Spain's King Philip II wanted to restore Catholicism in England and favored the Spanish Infanta Isabella as a claimant, a move deeply opposed by the Protestant English establishment. France's interest fluctuated based on its own political needs. Elizabeth's refusal to publicly address the succession created an atmosphere of tension and uncertainty that permeated all levels of society. How the Queen's dental decay influenced court dynamics. The Queen's dental pain and decay affected more than just her public speaking. It influenced the entire atmosphere of the court. Elizabeth's rotting teeth made eating painful, which weakened her physically. She could only consume soft foods, limiting her strength and stamina. This physical frailty made the Queen more dependent on her courtiers and advisers. Her foul breath, a direct result of the decay, was a source of embarrassment. Courtiers would often try to avoid close proximity, and it became common practice to carry scented handkerchiefs or burn incense during meetings with the Queen. Elizabeth's attempts to conceal her condition added an aura of mystery and fragility to the court. This fragility encouraged nobles to become bolder in their ambitions, sensing the Queen's weakening hold on power. The limits of Tudor medical knowledge. Elizabeth's dental problems reflected the limits of 16th century medicine. Dentistry was primitive, extractions were painful and risky without anesthesia, and there were no effective treatments for tooth decay. The Queen's physicians and barbers could only offer crude remedies, rinses of vinegar and herbs, abrasive powders to clean teeth, or tooth extractions performed without proper sterilizations. These measures often caused more harm than good, spreading infection or causing severe pain. Elizabeth's fondness for sugary foods worsened her condition. Sugar was becoming a luxury item in England, associated with wealth and status. However, it fed the bacteria responsible for tooth decay. The Queen's sweet tooth was both a personal indulgence and a political symbol of Tudor excess. Despite her dental misery, Elizabeth maintained her regal image through elaborate costumes, makeup, and court rituals. Powdered wigs and white lead makeup helped hide the blackness of her teeth and the pallor of her skin. Diplomatic consequences of a silent Queen Elizabeth's poor dental health had unexpected diplomatic effects. Foreign envoys found it increasingly difficult to engage with a monarch who was often silent or difficult to understand. Reports from Spanish and French diplomats mention the Queen's foul breath and quiet demeanor. They interpreted her silence as a sign of weakness, fueling hopes among Spain and Catholic Europe that England's Protestant rule might soon fall. This perception influenced foreign policy. Spain increased pressure on England, preparing for the possibility of conflict. France sought opportunities to mediate or exploit England's instability. The European balance of power was shifting, partly due to the Queen's health. The symbolism of decay, Elizabeth's blackened teeth, became a metaphor for the decay of the Tudor dynasty itself. Outwardly magnificent, the monarchy was rotting from within. The Queen's refusal to confront her dental problems mirrored the reluctance of her court to address the succession crisis openly. This symbolism was not lost on contemporaries. Poets and satirists of the time used imagery of decay and rot to comment on the political uncertainty. The Queen's teeth became a symbol of the dangers of denial and secrecy. The final years, endurance amid decline. Despite the physical pain and political turmoil, Elizabeth remained on the throne until her death in 1603. Her determination and political skill preserved stability through uncertain times. Her dental decay, while a personal affliction, was also a public symbol of her resilience and the limits of power. The Queen endured the discomfort and embarrassment, maintaining her role as the last Tudor monarch. When Elizabeth died, the throne passed peacefully to James VI of Scotland, who became James I of England, uniting the two crowns. The succession crisis that had loomed throughout Elizabeth's reign was finally resolved. Elizabeth's rotting teeth did more than cause pain. They shaped the politics of a kingdom. They influenced diplomacy, court intrigue, and the very future of England. This story reminds us that even the smallest details, like a queen's teeth, can change the course of history. The passing of Queen Elizabeth I in 1603 marked the end of the Tudor dynasty and the beginning of a new era, the Stuart period under King James VI. The transition which could have erupted into chaos and civil war, instead unfolded with remarkable peace. But the path to that moment was paved with years of tension, political intrigue, and the unexpected influence of something as mundane and as intimate as Elizabeth's rotten teeth. The story of Elizabeth's dental decay isn't just a medical curiosity or an odd historical footnote. It's a window into how personal health can have far reaching consequences for politics, diplomacy, and even national identity. The aftermath of Elizabeth's death. When Elizabeth died, many feared the worst. The kingdom had been without a clear heir for decades, and the Queen's health had visibly declined in her later years. The uncertainty bred rumors of plots, conspiracies, and power grabs. Yet, James VI of Scotland, the favored successor, ascended the English throne peacefully as James I. His claim was accepted by the English Parliament and nobility, partly because he was Protestant and because he represented continuity of the Tudor bloodline through his grandmother, Margaret Tudor. James's smooth accession was unusual in an age when contested successions often led to civil wars. But it was precisely the years of uncertainty during Elizabeth's reign and the political groundwork laid by her ministers that helped prepare the way. The legacy of a rotten tooth. It's tempting to dismiss Elizabeth's decaying teeth as a minor detail, but the truth is more complicated. Her dental health influenced how she ruled, how others perceived her, and how the political game was played. The pain and embarrassment caused by her teeth made Elizabeth more secretive and cautious. She avoided long conversations, delegated authority, and hesitated to commit to naming a successor. This hesitation created a power vacuum that shaped the court's dynamics. Elizabeth's blackened teeth became a symbol of vulnerability, decay, and the limits of monarchical power. They reflected the tensions of a kingdom poised between stability and uncertainty, political factions and court intrigue. During the final decades of Elizabeth's reign, political factions jockeyed for influence, often behind closed doors. Without a clear heir, nobles and courtiers maneuvered to position themselves advantageously for the inevitable transition. Some factions supported James VI of Scotland, hoping a unified Britain would strengthen the realm. Others preferred English claimants, worried about Scottish influence. Still others were influenced by foreign powers, particularly Spain and France, which had their own stakes in English succession. Elizabeth's deteriorating health, including her dental problems, made her less able to control these factions. Her silence on succession allowed whispers and plots to flourish. How dental decay affected court politics. The Queen's dental decay had subtle but significant effects on court life. Her painful teeth limited her ability to participate in long discussions or ceremonies. Her foul breath was a source of discomfort and avoidance. Courtiers grew frustrated by the Queen's silence and occasional irritability. They began acting more independently, sometimes in opposition to one another. The Queen's blackened teeth became an unwelcome reminder of her frailty, undermining her image of strength. This shift contributed to the growing instability that defined the last years of the Tudor monarchy. Medical treatments and cultural attitudes. Elizabeth's dental troubles were compounded by the limitations of contemporary medicine. The 16th century had little understanding of oral hygiene or effective treatments for tooth decay. Physicians and barber surgeons offered crude remedies, herbal rinses, tooth extractions without anesthesia, and abrasive powders. These treatments often caused more pain and infection. Sugar consumption, increasing among the English nobility, worsened dental decay. Despite this, blackened teeth were sometimes considered fashionable, adding a strange cultural twist to the problem. Diplomatic implications of the Queen's health. Elizabeth's poor dental health affected England's foreign relations. Diplomats noted her foul breath and declining vigor. Interpreting these signs as weakness, Spain increased pressure on England. Preparing for conflict, France adjusted its policies accordingly. Elizabeth's physical decline thus influenced the European balance of power. Her blackened teeth, a minor detail in medical terms, had outsized political impact, symbolism, and public perception. The Queen's rotten teeth became a metaphor for the Tudor dynasty's decline. Poets and satirists used imagery of decay to comment on political uncertainty. Elizabeth's refusal to address her dental problems symbolized a reluctance to confront deeper issues. Her teeth were both a personal and political symbol of decline. The Stuart succession and the uniting of crowns, James III's peaceful accession united England and Scotland under one crown, changing the British Isles forever. The years of uncertainty and political maneuvering, shaped in part by Elizabeth's health and dental decay, had prepared the way. The reign of King James III, who ascended to the English throne after Elizabeth III's death in 1603, marked a dramatic shift in British politics and identity. James was the first monarch to rule both England and Scotland, an event that would eventually lead to the creation of Great Britain centuries later. But the peaceful transition masked a turbulent political landscape shaped in large part by the legacy of Elizabeth's reign, and surprisingly, by her rotting teeth. The lingering effects of her declining health continued to ripple through the halls of power, influencing the policies and decisions of the new Stuart monarchy. James inherited a kingdom fraught with unresolved tensions. The question of religious divisions remained acute. England was officially Protestant, but Catholics still held significant power and influence, especially among the nobility. James himself was raised Presbyterian in Scotland, but adopted Anglicanism upon taking the English throne. Yet, his reign faced ongoing pressure from Catholic factions eager to restore their faith's prominence. The Gunpowder Plot of 1605, a failed attempt by Catholic conspirators to blow up Parliament and assassinate the king, underscored how fragile peace was. The unresolved religious tensions were, in many ways, a continuation of the uncertainties that had plagued Elizabeth's court. Her refusal to name a successor, combined with her failing health and debilitating dental decay, had created a political vacuum that allowed radical factions on both sides of the religious divide to gain strength. Elizabeth's personal discomfort and silence on such crucial issues gave space for conspiracy and unrest to fester. King James's approach to governance reflected an attempt to stabilize this volatile environment. He worked to balance the interests of Protestants and Catholics while asserting royal authority. However, he lacked the fiery charisma and commanding presence of Elizabeth, whose bold speeches and carefully managed court had masked her physical frailties. Elizabeth's rotting teeth had robbed her of her vocal power in her later years, and James's more reserved style sometimes struggled to inspire the same loyalty. Beyond religion, James had to navigate the complex political landscape that Elizabeth's long silence on succession had left behind. Factions formed around key advisors and noble families, each with its own agenda. The Stuart court inherited a legacy of intrigue and factionalism, with courtiers vying for influence in the absence of a clear unifying monarch. Elizabeth's dental decay, which had limited her ability to engage actively with her court, had indirectly contributed to this fragmented power structure. Economically, England faced both opportunities and challenges under James. Trade was expanding, and the early seeds of colonialism were being planted with ventures like the Virginia Company. But financial strains were also evident, with the crown's expenditures often outpacing revenues. The long years of Elizabeth's reign, marked by costly conflicts such as the war with Spain, left the treasury depleted. The Queen's physical decline and the political instability it caused had hindered consistent governance and fiscal planning. The cultural and intellectual climate of James's reign also bore marks of Elizabeth's legacy. The Queen's court had been a center for the arts, fostering the works of Shakespeare, Marlowe, and many others. While Elizabeth's public image had suffered from her dental decay, her patronage of the arts remained strong. This tradition continued under James, whose reign saw the commissioning of the King James Bible and a flourishing of English literature. Yet, the contrast between Elizabeth's fading vitality and James's more scholarly demeanor shaped the tone of the court. In terms of foreign policy, James sought to avoid the wars that had dominated Elizabeth's later years. The Queen's poor health, symbolized by her decayed teeth, had made England appear vulnerable to European powers. James initially pursued peace treaties, such as the Treaty of London in 1604, which ended hostilities with Spain. This was a pragmatic move to consolidate his rule and focus on internal stability. However, the shadows of Elizabeth's reign lingered. The unresolved questions about religious tolerance and succession kept tensions simmering beneath the surface. James's reign, while peaceful at first, eventually faced challenges that echoed the uncertainties of his predecessor's final years. One fascinating aspect of this era is how something as seemingly trivial as dental decay could ripple outward into the highest echelons of power. Elizabeth's blackened teeth were more than a physical ailment. They were a symbol of a monarch's vulnerability and the fragility of a political system dependent on personal authority. Her inability or unwillingness to address her dental problems mirrored the reluctance to confront deeper structural issues in governance and succession. The courtiers and foreign diplomats who noticed her condition often interpreted it as a sign of England's weakening position. This perception influenced diplomatic negotiations and alliances, shaping Europe's balance of power. The Queen's rotting teeth became, in a sense, a political weapon wielded by her rivals and a source of anxiety for her supporters. James's succession marked a turning point, but it was one shaped by decades of tension, exacerbated by Elizabeth's declining health. The peace that followed was not guaranteed. It was the result of careful political maneuvering and the groundwork laid during the Tudor years. Understanding this connection between personal health and political fate reveals the deeply human side of history. Monarchs are often seen as symbols or abstract forces, but they are also individuals subject to pain, embarrassment, and physical limitations. Elizabeth's story reminds us that even the smallest details, a queen's teeth, can influence the destiny of a nation. The story of Elizabeth's rotten teeth and their impact on British politics is a vivid example of how history is shaped by both grand events and intimate realities. It challenges us to consider how personal vulnerabilities intersect with public power and how appearances, health, and human frailty can alter the course of kingdoms. The early years of James I's reign were marked by an intense effort to unify his two kingdoms, England and Scotland, under a single crown. This ambition, while groundbreaking, was not without challenges. Decades of separate political cultures, laws, and traditions meant that James faced resistance from nobles and commoners alike on both sides of the border. His vision of a unified Great Britain was ahead of its time, but the realities of governance required careful negotiation and compromise. This political landscape was complicated by the enduring legacy of Elizabeth I's reign, the Queen's prolonged silence on succession, and her visible decline, notably her deteriorating teeth, had left a power vacuum that James now sought to fill. The factionalism that had grown during Elizabeth's later years did not disappear overnight. Instead, it transformed into new alignments and rivalries within the Stuart court. As James struggled to assert his authority over both English and Scottish nobles, James's personality contrasted sharply with Elizabeth's. Whereas Elizabeth had used her wit, charisma, and carefully managed public persona to maintain control, James was more introspective and scholarly. He was deeply interested in theology, literature, and the arts, but his style sometimes lacked the boldness required to manage the volatile political environment inherited from the Tudors. This shift in leadership style affected how court politics played out and how the monarchy was perceived by the public and foreign powers. Religious tensions remained a defining issue throughout James's reign. Elizabeth's efforts to maintain a Protestant England had been cautious and sometimes ambiguous, designed to prevent outright conflict, but leaving many dissatisfied. Her declining health and inability to decisively address religious factions during her final years allowed Catholic and Puritan elements to grow in strength. James inherited this delicate balance and had to navigate it carefully. The Gunpowder Plot of 1605 was a dramatic reminder of the ongoing religious strife. The failed attempt by Catholic conspirators to assassinate James and blow up Parliament sent shockwaves through the kingdom. It intensified anti-Catholic sentiment and led to stricter laws against Catholics, deepening divisions within English society. The plot's legacy would influence British politics for decades. Despite these challenges, James I worked to foster cultural and intellectual growth. His reign saw the commissioning of the King James Bible, a monumental work that would shape English language and religious thought for centuries. He patronized poets and playwrights, continuing the Elizabethan tradition of royal support for the opera arts. However, the shadow of Elizabeth's failing health and symbolic decay lingered, influencing the tone of his court and public image. Elizabeth's blackened teeth had become a powerful symbol not only of her personal vulnerability, but also of the fragile state of the monarchy she left behind. This image persisted in public consciousness and political discourse. Courtiers whispered about the Queen's inability to manage her own health, seeing it as a metaphor for her reign's unresolved crises. In foreign affairs, James sought to avoid the costly wars that had marked Elizabeth's later years. His early peace treaty with Spain was a pragmatic move to consolidate power and focus on internal matters. However, Europe remained a chessboard of shifting alliances and religious conflict, and England's position was precarious. Foreign diplomats continued to monitor the English court closely, aware of its recent history of instability tied, in part, to the Queen's failing health. Economic pressures also shaped James's rule. The Crown's finances were strained, a legacy of Elizabeth's military campaigns and the costs of maintaining an expanded court. James's court was known for its lavish spending, which sometimes alienated Parliament and the public. The Queen's decline had contributed to inconsistent governance, complicating financial management during the transition. The personal health of monarchs continued to play a crucial role in political stability. Elizabeth's dental decay had shown how physical ailments could undermine authority and influence political outcomes. James himself faced health challenges, though none as publicly symbolic as Elizabeth's teeth. The connection between the monarch's body and the realm's well-being remained a powerful theme. Elizabeth's story is a reminder that history is not only shaped by grand battles or political maneuvers, but also by intimate human details. The Queen's rotten teeth may seem trivial, but their impact on her behavior, her court, and her kingdom was profound. They altered how she interacted with advisors, how others perceived her, and ultimately how history unfolded. As James's reign progressed, the shadows of the Tudor past persisted. The union of the crowns was a historic achievement, but it was also the beginning of a new set of challenges rooted in a kingdom still healing from decades of uncertainty and personal vulnerabilities. This intertwining of personal health and political power offers a nuanced view of history. It reminds us that rulers are human, subject to the frailties of the body as well as the complexities of governance. Elizabeth's rotten teeth are a striking example of how even the smallest, most personal afflictions can echo through the corridors of power and alter the course of nations. King James the Usurper's reign, while notable for uniting the crowns of England and Scotland, was also marked by ongoing challenges rooted in the legacy of his predecessor, Elizabeth I. The political and social fabric of England was still fragile, and the personal weaknesses Elizabeth had displayed in her later years, symbolized by her decaying teeth, continued to shape perceptions of monarchy and power. This subtle but powerful influence affected James's policies, the court's atmosphere, and England's place on the international stage. One of the most significant challenges James faced was the complex relationship between the monarchy and Parliament. Under Elizabeth, the monarchy had managed to maintain a delicate balance of power, often bending political norms without breaking them. Elizabeth's reticence and her physical limitations, particularly her dental pain and its impact on her public presence, meant she often relied heavily on trusted advisors who wielded significant influence. This created an environment where Parliament's role remained somewhat restrained but never fully alienated. James's approach was different. He believed strongly in the divine right of kings, that monarchs were appointed by God and should hold unquestioned authority. This belief sometimes brought him into conflict with Parliament, especially over financial matters. Elizabeth's reign had left the treasury depleted, due in part to prolonged military campaigns and the expensive maintenance of her court. James's lavish spending and inability to secure adequate funding without parliamentary approval fueled tensions. The echoes of Elizabeth's declining health lingered here as well. Her inability to decisively manage the kingdom's finances in her later years, a result partly of the distractions and discomfort caused by her dental problems, had left a legacy of fiscal instability. James inherited this weakened financial position and faced increasing pressure to demonstrate effective leadership and control over resources. Religious discord continued to be a defining feature of James's reign. Elizabeth's policies had aimed to establish Protestantism firmly, but had not eliminated Catholic dissent or Puritan dissatisfaction. Her dental decay, which limited her engagement and sometimes forced her into silence on critical issues, indirectly allowed these tensions to grow beneath the surface. James had to confront these factions with greater urgency. The gunpowder plot in 1605 was a shocking manifestation of these religious divisions. The conspirators sought to overturn Protestant rule and restore Catholic power by assassinating James and blowing up Parliament. Its failure led to a harsh crackdown on Catholics and intensified fears of religious conspiracies. The episode underscored how fragile James's position was and how unresolved issues from Elizabeth's reign still haunted the kingdom. James's cultural patronage helped ease some tensions, promoting unity through shared traditions and arts. The King James Bible, commissioned during his reign, became a unifying religious and cultural text that reflected the monarch's desire for stability and cohesion. This work helped shape the English language and religious practice for centuries, providing a lasting legacy amid political uncertainty. Despite these achievements, James struggled to assert the same level of personal authority that Elizabeth had maintained, even as her health declined. The Queen's decaying teeth had limited her public appearances and oratory power, forcing her to rely on image and symbolism. James lacked Elizabeth's charisma and instead leaned on scholarly knowledge and royal prerogative, which sometimes alienated both Parliament and the public. Foreign policy under James was cautious and pragmatic. Unlike Elizabeth, who had engaged England in significant conflicts such as the war with Spain, James sought peace, exemplified by the Treaty of London in 1604. However, the continental balance of power remained volatile, and England's position was scrutinized by allies and rivals alike. The Queen's earlier health issues and the resulting political instability had made England appear vulnerable, a perception James worked hard to dispel. The intersection of personal health and political power remained a persistent theme. Elizabeth's blackened teeth were a symbol of a monarchy struggling to maintain control amid physical decline. This image influenced how contemporaries viewed the crown and how political actors maneuvered for advantage. James's own health was less publicly scrutinized, but nonetheless important to his ability to rule effectively. Economically, James faced the consequences of Elizabeth's long reign and her later years' ineffective management. The royal finances were precarious, and the king's demands for money sparked frequent disputes with Parliament. The financial strain limited James's ability to implement ambitious policies and maintain his court, affecting the broader political landscape. Elizabeth's story reveals how intimately connected a ruler's personal condition can be with the fate of a nation. Her rotten teeth, far from being a trivial medical issue, played a role in shaping her behavior, her relationships with advisors, and the political uncertainties that followed. These factors set the stage for the Stuart era's complexities and challenges. As James's reign unfolded, the consequences of Elizabeth's physical decline continued to resonate. The union of the crowns was a historic milestone, but it came with new struggles that required deft leadership. The shadow of a queen's failing health and the symbolism of her dental decay remained a subtle but powerful influence on the course of British history. This story reminds us that history is shaped by the convergence of personal vulnerabilities and public responsibilities. Monarchs are human beings, subject to pain and frailty, and their physical conditions can have profound political consequences. Elizabeth's blackened teeth serve as a striking example of how intimate details of a ruler's life can ripple outward to affect the destiny of nations. King James I's reign faced a growing challenge in balancing tradition with the demands of a changing political landscape. The peaceful succession from Elizabeth I was historic, but the shadows cast by her final years, particularly her declining health and the symbolic impact of her rotten teeth, were far from behind. These personal vulnerabilities had shaped the political culture James inherited, and he struggled to maintain stability in their wake. One of James's biggest challenges was managing the increasingly powerful institution of Parliament. Unlike Elizabeth, who maintained a careful and sometimes distant relationship with Parliament, partly due to the physical constraints imposed by her health and dental pain, James found himself at odds with this growing political body. His belief in the divine right of kings often clashed with Parliament's push for greater influence over taxation and legislation. This conflict set the stage for tensions that would erupt more violently in later generations. The financial struggles of James's reign were also rooted in the difficulties of Elizabeth's era. The Tudor queen's lengthy wars, combined with the high costs of court life, had drained the treasury. Elizabeth's inability to manage finances effectively in her later years was compounded by the distractions of her declining health and the social discomfort caused by her dental decay. James inherited this fiscal instability and exacerbated it with his own extravagant spending habits. Religious strife remained a constant undercurrent in James's England. Elizabeth's policies had tried to enforce a Protestant settlement, but had not fully quelled Catholic dissent or the growing Puritan movement. Her tendency to avoid direct confrontation with these issues during her failing health allowed tensions to simmer. James's reign saw the consequences of this hands-off approach, with events like the Gunpowder Plot of 1605 highlighting the dangers of unresolved religious conflict. Despite these challenges, James sought to unify his kingdoms culturally and politically. The commissioning of the King James Bible was a significant step in this direction, providing a shared religious text that would become central to English-speaking Protestantism. James also continued Elizabeth's tradition of patronage in the arts, supporting playwrights, poets, and scholars. Yet, he lacked Elizabeth's ability to use personal charisma and public spectacle to maintain authority, skills she had relied on even as her teeth blackened and her health deteriorated. Elizabeth's rotting teeth had, in many ways, symbolized the fragility of monarchical power. Her dental decay was more than a personal affliction. It was a metaphor for the challenges faced by a monarchy struggling to adapt to a changing world. The Queen's diminished presence and vocal power weakened her ability to directly manage the court and government, opening space for factionalism and political uncertainty that James had to confront. The relationship between monarch and subject was evolving. Elizabeth had maintained a delicate balance by projecting strength despite her personal vulnerabilities. James's belief in absolute monarchy and his sometimes aloof demeanor alienated many, creating a disconnect between ruler and ruled. This shift was part of a broader political transformation that would eventually lead to conflicts over governance and the limits of royal authority. Internationally, James sought peace after the costly wars of Elizabeth's reign. The Treaty of London with Spain was a milestone in ending decades of hostilities. However, Europe remained a continent divided by religious wars and political rivalries. England's position was cautious, and foreign powers watched James's rule closely, still aware of the weaknesses revealed during Elizabeth's declining years. The symbolism of Elizabeth's teeth continued to echo in diplomatic circles. Foreign diplomats and monarchs viewed the English crown's recent history as one marked by physical and political vulnerability. This perception influenced negotiations and alliances, shaping the broader European balance of power. Economically, James's reign was marked by tensions between royal demands and parliamentary control. The financial instability inherited from Elizabeth was worsened by James's spending, leading to repeated clashes with Parliament over taxation. This ongoing struggle weakened the monarchy's authority and set the stage for future conflicts. Elizabeth's story, especially her struggle with dental decay, reminds us that history is often shaped by the intimate realities of human life. The Queen's blackened teeth were a visible sign of her mortality and frailty, and their political implications were far reaching. They influenced her behavior, limited her public engagement, and contributed to the uncertain succession that defined the end of the Tudor dynasty. James I's reign was both a continuation and a transformation of this legacy. The union of the English and Scottish crowns was a historic achievement, but it came with unresolved issues rooted in Elizabeth's personal decline. The connection between a monarch's health and the fate of the nation remained evident, illustrating the human dimension of political power. In reflecting on this period, we see how personal vulnerabilities intersect with public authority, shaping history in unexpected ways. Elizabeth's rotten teeth serve as a powerful reminder that the physical condition of rulers can affect not only their own lives, but also the destiny of entire kingdoms. As King James II's reign progressed, the influence of Elizabeth's legacy, especially the political and personal turmoil wrought by her declining health, continued to cast a long shadow over English politics. While James sought to establish his authority and unify his realms, the subtle but persistent echoes of Elizabeth's later years reminded everyone of the fragile nature of monarchy and governance. Elizabeth's rotting teeth, a visible sign of her physical decline, were much more than a personal ailment. They symbolized the vulnerability of a political system centered on a single ruler's persona. The Queen's struggle with dental decay had diminished her capacity to engage fully in court affairs, undermining her public image and allowing factionalism to grow unchecked. This weakened state contributed to the complex and often fractious political environment James inherited. James himself faced a complicated task in managing these inherited challenges. His belief in the divine right of kings meant he was often at odds with Parliament, which was asserting greater influence over taxation and governance. This friction was intensified by the financial strains left over from Elizabeth's reign. The Queen's extensive military campaigns and court expenses had depleted the royal coffers, and James's own spending habits only worsened the situation. Religious conflict remained another persistent source of tension. Elizabeth's cautious and sometimes ambiguous approach to Protestant and Catholic factions had left deep divisions unresolved. The Gunpowder Plot of 1605, a Catholic conspiracy to assassinate James and destroy Parliament, was a stark reminder of these ongoing threats. This event intensified anti-Catholic laws and sentiment, further polarizing English society. Despite these difficulties, James made notable cultural contributions. The King James Bible, commissioned during his reign, was a monumental achievement that helped unify religious practice and influence English literature for generations. The arts flourished under his patronage, continuing the legacy of Elizabeth's court. Yet, unlike Elizabeth, who had used her charisma and public presence, even while suffering from dental pain, to command loyalty, James's more scholarly and distant style sometimes alienated those he ruled. The symbolism of Elizabeth's blackened teeth lingered in the political imagination. They represented not only her personal suffering, but also the fragile state of the Tudor monarchy at the end of her reign. Her inability to openly confront her health problems mirrored the unresolved political and religious crises that culminated in the succession challenges James faced. James's reign, therefore, was as much about managing the consequences of Elizabeth's decline as it was about forging a new path. The union of the English and Scottish crowns was a historic milestone, but it also brought new complexities, including competing political cultures and loyalties. Internationally, James pursued peace and diplomacy, steering England away from the wars that had drained resources under Elizabeth. The Treaty of London with Spain was a significant achievement, yet England's position in a Europe rife with religious conflict remained precarious. The memory of Elizabeth's weakened state, symbolized by her dental decay, remained a factor in how foreign powers viewed English stability. Financially, James's court was often at odds with Parliament over funding. The ongoing struggle reflected the deeper challenge of transitioning from Tudor to Stuart rule, compounded by Elizabeth's earlier mismanagement during her final years. These tensions foreshadowed the more severe constitutional crises that would unfold later in the century. Elizabeth's experience underscores a critical truth about monarchy. The ruler's personal health is inseparable from the health of the realm. Her blackened teeth were a visible marker of human frailty, but they also carried political weight, affecting her ability to govern and maintain authority. The transition from Elizabeth to James illustrates how intimate details of a monarch's life can influence national history. This connection between personal vulnerability and political power is a theme that recurs throughout history, reminding us that leaders are more than symbols. They are individuals whose strengths and weaknesses shape the course of events. James's reign was deeply shaped by this dynamic. The challenges he faced in consolidating power, managing religious conflict, and navigating parliamentary relations were inseparable from the legacy of Elizabeth's physical and political decline. The Queen's rotting teeth serve as a potent symbol of this legacy, highlighting the fragile nature of authority and the complex interplay between health and power. Reflecting on this period, it becomes clear that history is not just the story of wars and policies, but also the story of human bodies and vulnerabilities. Elizabeth's decayed teeth were a small but significant factor in the turbulent transition from Tudor to Stuart England, shaping the political landscape in subtle yet profound ways. The personal health of monarchs has often been overlooked in traditional historical narratives, yet the case of Elizabeth I dramatically illustrates how a ruler's physical condition can profoundly influence the fate of a nation. Her deteriorating teeth were not merely a cosmetic issue or a private discomfort. They shaped her behavior, affected court dynamics, and ultimately had political consequences that rippled through British history. By the late 16th century, dental care was rudimentary at best. The understanding of oral hygiene was minimal, and many suffered from tooth decay and gum disease. For Elizabeth, who ruled England for 45 years, the chronic pain and appearance issues caused by her rotting teeth became an additional burden alongside the heavy responsibilities of monarchy. This physical decline began to manifest during critical years when the stability of the realm depended heavily on her personal leadership. Her dental decay influenced her public appearances. Elizabeth was famously adept at managing her image, using elaborate costumes, makeup, and carefully staged appearances to convey power and majesty. However, as her teeth blackened and her breath worsened, these strategies faced new challenges. Pain and embarrassment likely limited how often and how openly she addressed her subjects and advisors. Her renowned oratory and commanding presence were compromised, subtly shifting the balance of influence in her court. This physical vulnerability created openings for ambitious courtiers and political factions. Those closest to the queen gained disproportionate power as Elizabeth's ability to engage actively diminished. Decisions increasingly rested on a smaller circle, with advisors vying for influence in a volatile environment. This concentration of power sometimes led to rivalries and mistrust, destabilizing the court's internal cohesion. The Queen's dental problems also had diplomatic repercussions. Monarchs and ambassadors of other nations were acutely aware of her declining health. Physical signs of frailty in a ruler could be interpreted as political weakness, inviting challenges both from within and abroad. The Queen's rotting teeth became a symbol, albeit an unspoken one, of the vulnerabilities England faced as the Tudor dynasty approached its end. Succession became a pressing issue as Elizabeth aged and her health waned. Without an heir, the question of who would follow her was a source of intense speculation and political maneuvering. The Queen's physical decline, marked by her deteriorating teeth, heightened anxieties about the future stability of the realm. These concerns shaped the actions of nobles, foreign powers, and eventually her successor, James VI of Scotland. James's ascent to the English throne was peaceful compared to many royal successions, but it carried the weight of expectation and uncertainty. The Stuart king inherited a kingdom still grappling with the legacies of Elizabeth's long reign and her physical decline. The symbolic impact of her rotten teeth lingered, a reminder of how personal health could influence political fortunes. Throughout his reign, James struggled with many of the same issues that had challenged Elizabeth, managing religious divisions, securing finances, and balancing relations with Parliament. Yet the transition from Tudor to Stuart was never just political, it was also deeply personal. The memory of Elizabeth's vulnerabilities shaped James's approach to kingship, sometimes causing him to assert his authority more forcefully in an effort to dispel doubts. Elizabeth's dental decay also highlights the broader historical context of health and medicine during the era. The lack of effective dental treatments meant that even the most powerful were not immune to the ravages of disease and pain. This reality affected not only monarchs, but also their courts and the societies they governed. The symbolic resonance of Elizabeth's blackened teeth extended beyond her lifetime. Artists, writers, and political commentators used her physical decline as a metaphor for the challenges facing the monarchy and the nation. This imagery persisted in political discourse, shaping perceptions of authority and legitimacy. Ultimately, Elizabeth's experience underscores the intricate connections between the personal and the political. Her rotting teeth were not just a medical issue, they were intertwined with her identity as a ruler, the stability of her court, and the fate of England itself. This intimate detail of her life provides a unique lens through which to understand the broader historical transformations of the period. As history moved forward, the lessons of Elizabeth's reign and her physical decline informed the evolving nature of monarchy. The vulnerabilities exposed by her dental problems became part of the collective memory that shaped how future rulers approached their roles and responsibilities. This story challenges us to reconsider how we view historical figures, not simply as distant larger-than-life characters, but as complex individuals shaped by their bodies and health. Elizabeth the Free's rotten teeth remind us that the course of history can hinge on the most human of frailties, revealing the profound impact of personal health on political power. The legacy of Elizabeth I's deteriorating health, symbolized most vividly by her blackened teeth, continued to influence British politics long after her death. This legacy was not just a footnote in history, it shaped the very structures and tensions that defined the Stuart period and beyond. Understanding this connection reveals how personal, physical struggles of a monarch can ripple outward to shape an entire nation's trajectory. One of the key ways Elizabeth's decline affected subsequent politics was through the precedent it set for royal authority. During her reign, the Queen's diminishing ability to physically command her court led to a gradual shift in power toward advisors and parliament, while Elizabeth maintained ultimate control. Her reticence and physical pain, compounded by her dental problems, meant that she increasingly delegated responsibilities. This delegation altered the balance of power, empowering factions within the court and parliament to assert themselves more boldly. James I inherited this altered political landscape, one in which the monarch's personal influence was less absolute than before. His struggles to assert authority over Parliament were partly rooted in this evolving dynamic. Elizabeth's declining health and the resulting shift in governance styles had already begun to erode the mystique of the monarch as the unquestioned ruler. James's belief in the divine right of kings clashed with this new reality, leading to frequent conflicts that would set the stage for future upheaval. The symbolism of Elizabeth's blackened teeth extended beyond the English court and into the cultural imagination of the time. Artists and writers often depicted the Queen with an emphasis on her dignity, despite evident signs of aging and decay, subtly acknowledging the toll that years of rule and physical decline had taken. This imagery served as a reminder of the impermanence of power and the inevitable human frailty behind royal grandeur. Religious tensions, a defining feature of Elizabeth's reign, were exacerbated by her reduced capacity to address them decisively in her later years. The Queen's dental pain and resulting discomfort likely limited her willingness to engage directly with religious disputes, allowing divisions to deepen. These unresolved conflicts became even more pronounced under James VI, whose own policies sparked dissent from both Catholics and Puritans. The Gunpowder Plot, in particular, was a direct consequence of these tensions. The conspiracy to assassinate James and restore a Catholic monarch was not only a religious statement, but also a reaction to the political uncertainties left by Elizabeth's cautious and sometimes inconsistent religious policies. The plot's failure led to harsher repression of Catholics, further polarizing English society and increasing distrust between the monarchy and segments of its population. Economically, the financial difficulties that plagued James's reign can also be traced back to Elizabeth's final years. Her inability to manage court expenses and military funding effectively, partly due to the distractions of her poor health, left the treasury depleted. James's lavish court lifestyle and demands for funding without sufficient parliamentary Approval exacerbated these problems, fueling political friction and instability. Internationally, the perception of England's monarchy as vulnerable persisted. Elizabeth's declining health, symbolized by her visible dental decay, projected an image of a weakened state, encouraging rival powers to test England's resolve. James's diplomatic efforts to secure peace, such as the Treaty of London with Spain, were attempts to counterbalance this image and stabilize England's position in Europe. The intertwining of personal health and political legitimacy became a recurring theme in British history. Elizabeth's blackened teeth were a stark reminder that monarchs were mortal and that their physical frailties could undermine even the most powerful reigns. This awareness influenced how future rulers presented themselves and managed their public images. Advancements in medical knowledge were slow, and dental care remained primitive for centuries. Elizabeth's experience highlighted the need for better understanding of health and hygiene, which would eventually become factors in the evolving relationship between rulers and their subjects. The physical well being of monarchs became increasingly important as symbols of national strength and unity. In a broader historical context, Elizabeth's story challenges modern readers to consider the intimate realities behind political power. The personal discomfort and pain she endured were inseparable from the decisions she made and the challenges she faced. This connection underscores the human side of history, reminding us that leaders' bodies and health profoundly affect their reigns. Her legacy also shaped cultural perceptions of leadership and vulnerability. Elizabeth's ability to maintain authority despite her physical decline inspired admiration, but also highlighted the limits of human endurance. This duality influenced political thought, literature, and popular memory in the centuries that followed. As the Stuart era progressed, the lessons of Elizabeth's reign, particularly the impact of her health issues, continued to resonate. Monarchs became more aware of the importance of projecting strength, both physically and politically, to maintain legitimacy. The symbolism of her blackened teeth remained a potent reminder of the dangers posed by hidden weaknesses. Ultimately, Elizabeth I's deteriorating health, epitomized by her rotten teeth, played a subtle yet significant role in shaping British political history. Her personal struggles had far reaching consequences that influenced the governance, culture, and international standing of England well into the 17th century. The tale of Elizabeth I's deteriorating teeth is often overshadowed by the grand narratives of battles, alliances, and royal drama, yet it holds a unique and revealing place in the tapestry of British history. These seemingly minor details, her blackened, painful teeth, and the resulting effects on her speech and public presence, help us understand the fragility behind the iconic image of the Virgin Queen. More importantly, they illuminate how deeply intertwined a monarch's personal health can be with political stability and the fate of a nation. Elizabeth's reign was marked by extraordinary achievements. She navigated religious turmoil, repelled the Spanish Armada, and presided over a cultural renaissance. Yet beneath this facade of strength was a woman grappling with intense physical suffering, isolation, and vulnerability. Her decaying teeth in particular, were a silent but persistent challenge. In an age lacking modern dental care, this condition not only caused her severe pain, but also affected how she communicated, interacted, and exercised power. The Queen's blackened teeth symbolized more than decay. They represented the human limits of monarchy. Elizabeth's ability to mask her pain and maintain an imposing image began to wane as her health deteriorated. She withdrew from the public eye, delegated more responsibilities to her advisors, and struggled with the demands of governance. This physical decline subtly weakened her grip on power and emboldened factions within the court eager to influence the succession and policy. Elizabeth's personal struggle with dental decay thus contributed to a broader political atmosphere of uncertainty. The Queen's inability to produce an heir, a consequence of her choice and possibly her declining health, left England facing an unprecedented succession crisis. The question of who would succeed her was not only a political issue, but also a reflection of the frailty revealed by her physical condition. This uncertainty opened the door for James VI of Scotland, whose accession united the crowns of England and Scotland, but also ushered in new challenges and tensions. King James I inherited a kingdom shaped in part by Elizabeth's physical decline. His reign struggled with the consequences of a weakened monarchy and shifting power dynamics. The tensions between the crown and parliament, the unresolved religious conflicts, and the strained finances were all legacies of the Tudor era's final, difficult years. James's belief in the divine right of kings was often at odds with a parliament growing in confidence, signaling a shift toward constitutional conflict. The symbolism of Elizabeth's teeth extended beyond her reign. It became a cautionary tale about the vulnerability of rulers and the dangers of unchecked physical decline. Future monarchs and political leaders would come to understand the importance of health, image, and presence in maintaining authority. The very notion that a king or queen's physical state could influence the stability of a realm challenged traditional ideas of royal invincibility. The cultural memory of Elizabeth I often glosses over these intimate details, focusing instead on her political acumen and theatrical majesty. Yet it is precisely this contrast, the great public persona shadowed by private suffering, that enriches our understanding of her reign. It humanizes one of history's most famous figures and offers insight into the delicate balance between power and mortality. Beyond the personal and political implications, Elizabeth's dental decay also offers a lens on the broader social and medical realities of the time. Poor dental health was common across all classes, reflecting the limitations of 16th century medicine and hygiene. The Queen's struggles were emblematic of a society grappling with diseases that modern science would only begin to conquer centuries later. Her experience highlights how even the most privileged were not immune to the vulnerabilities of the human body. Internationally, Elizabeth's health issues affected England's standing among European powers. Monarchs and diplomats keenly observed signs of weakness, interpreting the Queen's physical decline as a metaphor for political fragility. This perception influenced alliances, negotiations, and power calculations during a critical period of European history marked by religious wars and dynastic rivalries. The ripple effects of Elizabeth's deteriorating health extended into literature and art. Writers and artists captured the tension between the Queen's public majesty and private frailty, contributing to a complex legacy that blends reverence with realism. This nuanced portrayal challenged idealized images of royalty and paved the way for more humanized depictions of rulers in cultural works. As the 17th century unfolded, the lessons of Elizabeth's reign, especially the impact of her health on politics, remained relevant. The English Civil War and the eventual establishment of constitutional monarchy can, in part, be traced back to the shifts in power dynamics that her physical decline helped initiate. The understanding that monarchs were fallible humans with bodies that could betray them played a subtle role in reshaping the British political landscape. Today, the story of Elizabeth's rotten teeth reminds us that history is not only shaped by wars and treaties, but also by the intimate details of human experience. It challenges us to view historical figures as multidimensional individuals whose personal struggles influence public events in profound ways. This perspective enriches our appreciation of the past and deepens our insight into the nature of power. As we reflect on this remarkable story, it becomes clear that even the most iconic rulers are subject to the vulnerabilities of the human body. Elizabeth's decaying teeth were a silent force that influenced her reign and, by extension, the course of British politics. This intersection of personal health and national destiny invites us to look closer at history's human side. Thank you for joining me on this fascinating exploration of how rotten teeth helped change British politics. If you found this story intriguing and want to uncover more unexpected histories told in a way that's anything but boring, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Your support helps keep these stories alive and accessible, and I love hearing your thoughts and questions, so feel free to leave a comment below. Together, we'll keep uncovering the hidden tales that history has to offer. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the surprising ways in which the smallest details can shape the greatest stories.